Hello students, today let us learn the third poem of your English textbook, First Flight. The name of the poem is A Tiger in the Zoo by George Leslie Norris. He was born on 21st May 1921 and died on 6th April 2006. He was a prize-winning Welsh poet and short story writer. Wales is a country that is a part of United Kingdom. He is considered as the most important Welsh writers of the post-war period, and his literary works have won many prizes. His famous works are Finding Gold, The Loudwinder, Phoenix Living Poet series, Ransom, etc. In the poem, A Tiger in the Zoo, the poet explains the agony and the helplessness of a caged tiger that lives in a zoo. The poet explains what his life could be if he had been a free animal. The poet has tried to explain about the condition of animals that are caged by human beings for their own fun. The poem begins with a description of a tiger that is very beautiful and is walking in his little cage. He has beautiful stripes on his skin and has velvet-like soft paws. But the tiger is not happy and is quite angry about being confined in the cage. The poet says that if the tiger was not confined to the zoo cage, he would have been hiding himself behind the long grass near some water bodies in order to catch his prey, that is a deer or any other small animal. Also, he would have terrorized the residents of the villages around the forest area. But the reality is totally different or opposed to this. He was confined in a cage which was made up of strong building materials, and he was helpless there. He could not show his power to the visitors, therefore he never tries to terrorize the people who come to see him in the cage. The tiger is described as being powerless and agonized by the poet in this poem. He says that during night he is all alone and he passes time by listening to the voice of the patrolling vehicles of the police, and he looks at the stars in the sky. The cage life has totally changed the tiger's personality. The poet is trying to say that the animal, which is famous for its fearlessness and freedom, is confined, and he is sad due to the human beings who want to derive their pleasure by looking at him in the zoo. The poem has 5 stanzas and it follows the rhyme scheme A, B, C, B. I will talk about the other poetic devices used in the poem after the detailed explanation of every stanza. Now, let us learn the poem in detail. He stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage, on pads of velvet quiet in his quiet rage. Here, in this opening stanza of the poem, the poet says that the tiger that is confined in the cage of the zoo moves around in the small cage under his bright colored skin. He further says that the tiger can take only a few steps because the cage is too small and it is not easy to move around in that. One cannot hear the footsteps because he has very soft feet, like velvet, because of which there is no sound of the tiger's footsteps. The tiger is infuriated because he is confined to the cage and he is not free, and so he tries to control his anger by quietly walking in the limited area of the cage. Now, let us find out the literary devices used in this stanza. Rhyme scheme, as I told you, A, B, C, B. And other poetic device used here is personification. The tiger is personified because the poet refers to the tiger as he. Another poetic device is metaphor. Tiger's paws are compared with velvet, pads of velvet. Two unlikely things are compared. That is metaphor. Then the third one is enjambment. The sentence is continuing to the next line without any punctuation marks. Here we can see he stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage. There is no punctuation mark used after the first line, And it continues to the next line. So that is enjambment. Imagery is the another poetic device. The poet tries to create an image about the tiger. He stalks in his vivid stripes the few steps of his cage. There we can see the image of a tiger. And that image is created by the beautiful use of words. Consonance and assonance. These are the other two poetic devices used here. Consonance is the use of consonant sound in the same line in different words. Like in this, S sound is repeated. Like stalks his stripes. Their S sound is repeated, and that is consonance. And in the other line we can find that I sound is repeated in the same line. Like in his vivid stripes. There we can find the I sound repeated in almost all the four words. And that is the use of assonance. And next is oxymoron. The use of adjectives opposite in meaning, like quite rage. And that's all about the first stanza. And now let's see the second stanza. He should be lurking in shadow, sliding through long grass near the waterhole where plump deer pass. The poet says that if this tiger were free, he would have hidden himself behind the long grass near the water bodies, so that he could easily catch a deer in order to have it as his food. Basically, the poet wants to say that the actual life of a tiger is to live in jungles, where he could catch his prey and eat it. But the tiger in the cage cannot do so, because he is confined into the four walls of that cage. The literary devices used in this stanza are enjambment. Line continues to the next line without punctuation mark, like sliding through to that last part, like a deer pass. Then alliteration, the use of sound P at the start of two words like plump pass. There the use of alliteration can be seen. And imagery, the poet has tried to create an image of tiger's activities lurking in shadow. There we can find his movement. That image of the movement of the tiger is given here in this line, lurking in shadow. He should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge, baring his white fangs, his claws, terrorizing the village. Here the poet says that if the tiger were free, he would have snarled around the houses located at the outskirts of the forest. He would terrorize people with his sharp teeth and claws. This would create fear among the people living in the villages. But unfortunately, he is not able to do that because he is confined to the four walls of that cage. Now let us see the literary devices used in this stanza. Enjambment, as we have seen. Line continues to the next line without punctuation marks. Example, we can see he should be snarling around houses at the jungle's edge. Onomatopoeia is the other poetic device used here. The use of words which denote sound, like snarling. Assonance, as we have seen, the use of vowel sound O and I. O in should around houses and I in barring his white his. And consonants, the use of consonant sound S, his fangs, his claws. But he is locked in a concrete cell, his strength behind bars, stalking the length of his cage, ignoring visitors. Now the poet comes to the reality of the tiger that is inside the cage. He says that the tiger is confined in a strong cell which is made of strong building materials. He further says that as the tiger is behind bars, so his ferociousness is also behind bars. He just stalks in the cage. He never tries to terrorize the visitors because his power is restricted by the cage. Therefore, he never tries to terrorize the visitors as he cannot attack them. If he were outside the cage, if he were in the forest, he would have terrorized the people living near the forest area. But here it is impossible for him to do because he is confined to the cage. Let us see the poetic device used in this line. Personification. The tiger is personified because the poet refers to him as he. Assonance, as we have seen, the use of vowel sound in the same line. He locked concrete cell. E sound is repeated. Then consonants, the use of consonant sound S. His strength bars. Then alliteration, the use of sound B at the start of two words like behind bars. He hears the last voice at night. The patrolling cars and stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. In this last stanza, the poet says that in the night, the tiger hears the sound of the patrolling cars. Patrolling cars are the vehicles of the police which are used to guard the zoo at night. So in the night, the tiger hears the sound of these cars. He then stares at the shining stars with his shining eyes. In shining eyes it's given because he might be dreaming about the life that he could have enjoyed in the forest if he were free. The poet wants to say that the tiger is sad, and as he is confined in the cage, so he cannot do anything. Therefore, he stares at the stars in the night and tries to divert his thoughts towards them, dreaming about his life in the forest. Let us see the poetic devices used here, this last stanza. Enjambment, the last two lines is a good example of enjambment. And stares with his brilliant eyes at the brilliant stars. The line continues without any punctuation mark. Alliteration, the use of sound H in the starting of two words like he hears. That's a good example of alliteration. Assonance, the use of I sound with his brilliant. In these three words, we find the repetition of the sound I. In this poem, the poet is conveying an important message that wild animals should be in their natural habitat. They are not meant to be kept in the small cages of the zoo for the entertainment of human beings. They have to be let free to live in their own natural habitat. That's all the poem. Thanks for watching.